Welcome back to CAD, Sketches and Parts, using Onshape. In the previous modules we got set up with Onshape and learned how to drive. In this module, we'll build this shape together. I encourage you to organize your desktops so that you can follow along side by side with me in your own Onshape document. Alright, where do we start? Take a look up at your top toolbar here. Do you see a rectangular brick with 4 holes drilled in the corners and a center post in the middle tool? Well, yeah, it's right here. No, I'm just kidding. Right? We need to break this down into its features. And so I would argue that if we start with that brick and then drill some holes in the corners and then extrude the post out of the middle, that sounds like a good way to tackle this problem. Alright, so where do we start? Well, the brick is rectangular, so we need to draw a rectangle. How do we draw a rectangle? Well, we start in sketch mode. So we need to come up here. You'll notice that there's a little button labeled sketch, and when you hover over it, it says create a new sketch. When we click on it, welcome back to
you'll
CAD,
notice
Sketches
that a little
and Parts,
handy
using Onshape.
Window pops up.
In the previous modules, we got set up with Onshape and learned how to drive.
Checkbox in the corner.
In this module, we'll build this shape together.
You're a red-blooded
I encourage you to organize your desktops so that you can follow along side by side with me in your own Onshape document.
They want to click on them. What? Oh no. Okay. So it says sketch 1. It's red. That doesn't seem good. Well, I want to fix this. Something seems wrong. I want to fix this. Again, red-blooded human. What do? Well, I'm probably going to try and come up here and say sketch again. And oh no. Oh no. Now there's 2 of them. I've broken it further. Okay. Slow down. What do we need to do? Well, first off, let's click this red X to get rid of sketch 2. And we've made a mistake before, but let's go back into sketch 1 by double-clicking on it in the features list. If I double-click on it, okay, I'm back in sketch 1. I can undo the terrible things that I've done so far, right? What needs to happen? Well, the first thing that we need to notice is that these blue texts will pop up whenever we use a new tool. And we need to read them so that we understand exactly what the tool is asking us to do. This one is asking us to select a sketch plane. So, which plane should we use? Well, so we have the front plane, the right plane, and the top plane. If you take a look at our part, which plane would you draw your rectangle on to extrude it out and into this brick shape? Well, really it's arbitrary, right? It doesn't matter. But let's choose something that makes sense. I think that the top plane makes sense, but if I had given you this part erected up on its side, you might have chosen the front or right plane. Again, it doesn't matter, but let's choose the top. So, I've got the top plane, and you'll notice that I've got sketch 1 on its side here. It lives, yep, it's on the top plane. Perfect. Okay, now, I want you to take a step back and play along with this little exercise with me. I want you to carefully, don't drop anything, I want you to carefully pick up your keyboard and look at it edge on. Edge on as if you're looking at the side view of your keyboard. Now, when you've done this, as you're holding it up, no peeking, click the G key. Okay, dumb exercise. Yes, I know. You can put your keyboard back down. Right? Why did I have you do this? Well, it's, this is to say that, why would you ever start drawing a picture while you were down on the table with your, putting your face down on the table, looking edge onto your paper? You wouldn't be able to see what you're doing, right? And so in the same way, we need to make sure that we're looking straight down on top of our drawing here so that there's no skewed perspective of what we're trying to accomplish, right? The easiest way to do that is to come over in any white space, right, while we're in sketch mode, hover over in any white space and left click, and you'll notice down at the bottom it says View Normal to Sketch Plane. What does normal mean? If any of you said the opposite of Mo, how dare you? I'll remember this. No. The normal means perpendicular or orthogonal. It's the vector that comes directly out of a plane, right?
And so when we click on that, what we'll be doing is looking straight down on this plane. Cool. Okay, so now we have a top-down view. We know that it's the view that we need in order to draw our sketch. Now, enough about these dang planes. Let's actually start drawing. Okay, so up here on the toolbar, you'll notice that the second icon is a rectangle. Now, you'll also notice a little drop-down arrow next to it. If you click on that, why would I have you choose the center point rectangle rather than the corner rectangle? Well, this is the first time you're going to hear me say this, but I'm going to say this again throughout the workshop, and I'm going to try and drill it into your head. Whenever we have the option to do so, we need to try our hardest to model about the origin. This means taking advantage of symmetry and making sure that our part and our part's features and our sketches are all symmetric and centered about the origin. Why we do this and the effects of doing this might not be clear to you right now. If they are, great. But if they are not, just, let's go with it for now. We'll see in a little bit why I ask you to do this. So, center point rectangle. We're going to come down here, and you'll notice that my cursor has changed into a set of crosshairs. And what I want you to do is hover over the origin until the center origin glows orange. And we're going to click once, not pressing and holding or anything like that. I'm going to click once, going to drag this out here wherever, and I'm just going to drop it, right? Okay. So it looks like I have successfully created a 5.481 inch by 2.555 inch rectangle, just as I intended. First try. Well, no, not exactly, right? So this proportionality might be close to what I wanted, but this is CAD. We need to be precise, right? We're not drawing on the back of a napkin. We need to actually use the tool to make a precise model of what we're trying to build. And so, what do we need to add? Well, we need to add dimensions. You'll notice up here on the toolbar, there's a little icon with two black arrows pointing away from each other. When you hover over it, it says that it's called the dimensioning tool. Let's click on this, and we now have our crosshairs again. If we hover over one of the edges and click on it, and pull our cursor away, you'll notice that this little balloon comes up, attached to your cursor, with the numbers 5.481 inches tagged to it, right? We need to drag this somewhere to drop it and place it so that it can start labeling and dimensioning our part. But here's where I want you to take your hands off the wheel real quick and watch me do this, because this is a common pitfall that a lot of people make. If I come over here, having just clicked on this top edge, and I decide to place my balloon here, right, you'll notice that I'm hovering over that vertical left edge, and it's glowing, right? So when I click on it, ruh-roh, what happened? Well, okay, so now it's creating a relationship, a dimensional relationship between that top edge and the left edge. And since they aren't in line with one another, since they're not parallel, that isn't something that you can describe with a distance, right? Instead, it is an angle, right? We know that this is a rectangle. We don't need to dimension this as 90 degrees. Thank you very much, Onshape. This is not helpful. So what I want you to do is press Escape, right? Get out of the tool, come back up to the dimensioning tool, and think carefully about where you're going to place your bubble, right? So I'm going to click once, this bubble pops up, right? And I'm going to place it far away, right? Out in white space so that there's no confusion about what I'm trying to dimension it to, right? I am trying to dimension the width of that top edge. All right, so now that we're here, let's just do 5, enter, right? No need to add units. The default units in Onshape are inches, imperial units, the silliest, most useless units in the world. No. If you decide to, you can always change your preferences to default to metric or whatever. But for now, let's just leave it with this. We're in inches. This is 5 inches. Okay, great. So we're still in the dimensioning tool. That's fine. We now need to dimension, well, what? what's left to dimension? A rectangle has dimensions of width and height or length, right? So if I come down here, right, and I click on this bottom edge, you'll notice that I'm actually trying to duplicate dimensions, right? This is not helpful, right? So which one do I need to do? Let me come back up here since I escaped out of the dimensioning tool. I need to click on either the right or the left edge of the rectangle. When I do that, I'm going to pull this balloon out, and now we're ready to dimension this one. Now, go with me here. Right? Let's do this. 2.54 cm, what is that? Centimeters, right? How many centimeters? Ah, an inch worth of centimeters. Interesting. The conversion factor between inches and centimeters is 2.54 centimeters per inch. And then if we do an asterisk, 3, enter. Hey, look at that. So 2.54 centimeters, which is 1 inch, multiplied by 3 is 3 inches. So this is kind of a trivial example of this, but it shows that we can not only put arbitrary units inside of dimensioning tools, right? Inside of these bubbles, but we can also put basic arithmetic. Pretty neat. It's like a little notepad, right? If I'm ever curious as to how I got to 3 inches, well, I can come in here. Oh yeah, I multiplied 2.54 centimeters times 3. Great. Okay. So we now have our 3-inch by 5-inch rectangle centered on the origin. Take a moment, pause the video, and make sure that you have the same. All right, looking good. Now, we have earned our green checkbox. With pride, you march over and you click it forcefully, and everything disappears, except for your rectangle. Great. Okay. So, now what do we do? Well, first, just like we were playing that little game with the keyboard, right, where I had you hold it up and see that, well, looking on edge is not a very helpful way of looking at a drawing, right? If we were to extrude this rectangle out along this normal view that we're looking at, right, would we be able to tell that it's changed? Well, no, right? There's no perspective, at least in this mode of CAD, right? And so as this rectangle extrudes out towards us, we're not going to be able to tell that it's changed. Which we can, that's, if you don't need to see it, then that's fine, but we're using a visual program, so let's take advantage of it. Right? So I'm going to come over here, and I can do a couple things. I can come over here, and I can use the camera and render options to choose something like isometric. Right? An isometric view is this kind of three-dimensional angled view. I can also come up here and click on one of the corners of this navigation cube. Okay, cool. But regardless, point is we are looking at an angle at our part. Right? So what do we need to do? Let's come up here to the top left-hand corner again. On our toolbar, we are in 3D mode, and you'll notice we have a option called Extrude. It looks like two little cubes stacked on top of each other. When we click on that, we have blue text. Let's read it and make sure that we know what we need to do. Faces and sketch regions to extrude. Okay, why do we use such flowery language, right? Effectively, this just means click on the dang rectangle, right? Well, let me back up and give you an example of where this language comes from, right? If I were to start a new sketch, look down and on the top, you don't need to follow along with this. And if I were to draw a sketch that looked like this, could I extrude that sketch? These two lines are just pointing out in space. And if I were to extrude them, well, I would get like a two-dimensional surface, right? Extruding a line creates a plane. And that's not what we want, right? We want something with meat on it, meat on the bone. So we need to make sure that we're extruding things that are closed loops, like our rectangle here, right? And in fact, you'll notice that Onshape, I'm going to come back here and get rid of this extra sketch that I've made. You'll notice that Onshape has filled in lightly that little sketch boundary that we made, right? Showing that it's something that we can make something 3D out of if we use the extrude tool. So if we click on the extrude tool and we click on the center of this rectangle, or at least the part inside, right, you'll notice, hey, look at that. We've got an extrusion. I'm going to align my camera a little bit better here. So this looks great, except for the fact that, let's step back for a moment. Earlier, I asked you to model about the origin. Let's do a quick check to make sure that we're doing that, right? Well, from the top view, yeah, we're symmetric left to right and top to bottom. Good. But if we look at the front or the right view, right? Well, not so much. All of our mass is above the top plane. That's not modeling about the origin, that is asymmetric modeling, right? So, maybe this will help, maybe it won't, but let's try and do it. If we come over to the extrusion window, and we click on this opposite direction arrow, well, okay, so now it's extruding down, but we still have this same issue, right? It is extruding all of its matter onto the down below the top plane. We're still not modeling about the origin. So I want to show you this little option. You'll notice that if you hover over blind, it says that this is called an end type. Let's click on this. And which of these options would you choose to make your extrusion symmetric? Well, that seems pretty easy. How about the symmetric one? If we click symmetric, now you see, okay, so it looks like we are extruding just as much up as we are down. If we're extruding to a depth of 1 inch, then it's extruding ½ an inch up and ½ an inch down. Cool, okay. So, now that we've satisfied our modeling about the origin requirement, we're going to press our green checkbox, and look at that. A 3 by 5 by 1 inch rectangle, a 3 by 5 by 1 inch rectangular prism centered on the origin. Do you have this? Go ahead and pause the video for a moment and make sure that you're in the same place as I am. Okay, looking good. This is the end of our first hands-on activity module. In the next module, we're going to drill the holes. I'll see you then.